Heart rate's climbing again, murmured Jack Chen, his eyes locked on the biometric displays flowing across his neural interface. The medical officer's jaw tightened as another spike registered. Kade's pushing 190. That's sustained stress territory. Dr. Yara Okonkwo pressed her palm against the observation window, watching the arena floor shift and reconfigure itself 3 kilometers below. Hexagonal platforms rose and fell like breathing tissue, creating an ever-changing labyrinth of obstacles that had broken the spirit of champions from 73 worlds. Behind her, the human preparation chamber hummed with tension thick enough to taste. Yara didn't turn from the window. He knows what he signed up for, does he? Jack's question hung in the recycled air. Because I'm not sure we did. 3 months earlier, the Consortium had extended humanity an invitation that couldn't be refused, not without admitting inferiority to species that had been traveling the stars while humans were still painting caves. The Gauntlet wasn't merely competition. It was assessment, performance-determined resource allocation, territorial rights, technological access. Fail spectacularly enough, and a species could find itself relegated to what the Consortium euphemistically called developmental observation, a gilded cage of restricted growth and enforced isolation. Earth had sent its finest. Kade Voss, whose military record included operations that remained classified even from most government officials. Zhen Liu, an astrophysicist whose work on quantum propulsion had accelerated humanity's interstellar timeline by decades. Amara Osei, a trauma surgeon who'd performed the first successful neural reconstruction on a living patient. Riko Tanaka, whose reflexes had been measured at the absolute threshold of human potential. The preparation chamber's atmospheric regulators hissed as pressure equalized. Kade emerged from the medical scan bay, his expression carved from granite. At 42, he carried himself with the economy of movement that separated soldiers from warriors. No wasted energy, no unnecessary tension. The neural interface port behind his left ear gleamed dully under the bioluminescent lighting. Verdict? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. They were exceptional by human standards. The Consortium hadn't bothered to hide its skepticism. Barely's been good enough my whole career. Yara finally turned from the window. You're cleared. Barely. This isn't urban warfare or counterinsurgency. Kade. Jack's voice carried an edge. The preliminary scans show your adrenal system's already in overdrive, and you haven't even entered the arena. If you spike during competition, then you pull me. Kade's eyes, the color of winter storms, didn't waver. But not before. We didn't come 47 light-years to play it safe. The chamber's main door irised open, admitting Zhen Liu. The physicist looked deceptively slight, her frame carrying the kind of whipcord strength that came from years of rock climbing and zero-gravity adaptation training. Silver threaded through her black hair despite her relative youth, a side effect of exposure to exotic particles during her propulsion experiments. The Vogue delegation just posted their preliminary scores, she announced, pulling up a holographic display with a gesture. Numbers materialized in the air, glowing an aggressive crimson. 18,000 aggregate points across 4 categories. They're calling it a modest beginning. Means nothing if we play to our strength instead of theirs. Riko's voice cut through the rising anxiety. The youngest of the team at 29, she'd spent the past hour in the simulation chamber. Her body a blur of controlled violence against holographic opponents. Sweat darkened her training suit, but her breathing remained measured. We're not trying to out-Vogue the Vogue, we just need to score high enough to earn respect. Amara whistled low, emerging from her own medical assessment. The surgeon's hands, steady enough to reconnect severed neurons, betrayed a slight tremor. Modest. The Vogue cleared obstacles that would liquefy most species. Their gravity tolerance alone. Respect. Kade tasted the word like poison. 3 months ago, the Consortium representative, what was that mantis-looking bastard called? Emissary Thixlar, Yara supplied. Right. Thixlar looked at our physical assessments and laughed. Actually laughed. Said humans were adorably determined, but fundamentally unsuited for gauntlet competition. His hands clenched. Suggested we might be better served in cultural exchange programs. The insult still burned. Humanity had clawed its way from tribal societies to interstellar civilization in a cosmic eye blink, and the Consortium's response was to pat them on the head and offer them a children's table at the Galactic feast. A chime echoed through the chamber, 3 ascending tones that set Yara's teeth on edge. The Consortium's calling card. The holographic display shifted, replaced by the towering form of Arbitrator Voluneth. The Krethian stood 3 meters tall, his chitinous plating reflecting the arena's ambient light in oil-slick patterns. 4 arms moved in complex gestures that the translation matrix rendered as formal speech. Human delegation. The Consortium extends greetings and final preparation time concludes in 30 standard minutes. Your team will compete in sequential trial format. Individual assessment followed by cooperative challenge. Scoring parameters have been transmitted to your medical team. May your efforts prove illuminating. The slight pause before that final word carried volumes of condescension. Zhen studied the requirements with the dispassionate focus that had made her one of Earth's premier theoretical minds. They're not just testing us, they're demonstrating why we don't belong. The connection severed. Jack immediately pulled up the transmitted parameters, his expression darkening as he parsed the data. They've structured it to highlight every physiological disadvantage we have. Look at this. Extended endurance trial under triple gravity conditions. Thermal resistance assessment ranging from near absolute zero to temperatures that would melt tungsten. Cognitive processing under neural disruption fields, and if things don't go perfectly. The expedition commander pulled up comparative analyses, her neural interface painting data across her field of vision. Conservative estimate, we might crack 12,000 aggregate if everything goes perfectly. That puts us in the bottom quartile of competing species. Then we demonstrate otherwise. Kade's voice carried absolute certainty. Yara, what's our realistic ceiling here? Diplomatic incident? Medical catastrophe? Take your pick. The implications were clear. What registered as survivable stress for a Vokor Krethian might kill a human. By the time the monitors screamed emergency, it could already be too late. Amara moved to the equipment stations, running final checks on the emergency medical systems they'd be allowed in the observation area. The Consortium rules permit immediate intervention if a competitor's life signs enter critical failure, but the definition of critical for humans versus other species. She didn't finish the thought. Kade gathered them in close, his tactical mind already dissecting the challenges into manageable components. Individual assessment first. That's our chance to establish baseline credibility. Zhen, you take cognitive processing. Your quantum calculus work means neural disruption won't phase you like it would the rest of us. Amara, thermal resistance. Your experience with extreme medical scenarios means you know how to keep functioning when your body's screaming. We're doing this anyway, Riko stated, matter of fact. So what's the plan? The surgeon nodded grimly. Controlled hypothermia during Arctic field surgeries. Yeah, I can work with temperature extremes, which means we improvise. Kade's expression hardened. Humans are persistence hunters. We don't quit. That's our advantage. Not stronger, not faster, but too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Riko, you're on combat reflexes. No explanation needed. The young woman's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. And I'll take extended endurance. I've done things in triple gravity that would surprise Voluneth. That leaves cooperative challenge. Zhen interjected. Unknown parameters. Designed for species with complementary abilities we don't possess. The chamber's lighting shifted to amber. 20 minutes remaining. Jack methodically attached monitoring patches to each competitor, the adhesive sensors creating a real-time biometric network. I'm setting conservative thresholds for intervention. Cardiac stress beyond 80% maximum. Neural activity indicating stroke risk. Core temperature deviation beyond survivable ranges. Any of those triggers, I'm pulling you immediately. Yara wanted to object, to point out that stubbornness was a poor substitute for actual physiological superiority, but she'd read Kade's file, the redacted operations and impossible missions. The man standing before her had survived situations that should have been his grave. If anyone could will their way through the Gauntlet's horrors, it was him. The team moved through final preparations with the choreographed efficiency of specialists who'd trained until action became instinct. Equipment checks, mental conditioning exercises, last reviews of Consortium species data, every advantage, however slight, carefully catalogued, understood. Kate acknowledged. But give us every second you can. Yara found herself beside Amara at the medical equipment station. The surgeon was triple-checking emergency supplies with fingers that had finally stopped trembling. You think we can actually do this? Amara asked quietly. No, Yara admitted. But I think they'll give us hell finding out we can't. A deep resonance vibrated through the structure, the Gauntlet's opening ceremony beginning. Through the observation window, the arena floor transformed, platforms rearranging into a central competition space surrounded by viewing galleries. Beings from across the Consortium filtered into observation decks, their forms ranging from the quasi-humanoid to the utterly alien. Atmospheric fields separated different environmental requirements, creating shimmering boundaries between methane breathers and silicon-based crystalline entities. Assembled Consortium. His translated voice boomed across multiple communication spectrums. We commenced the Gauntlet's 147th iteration. 8 species compete for advancement in resource allocation and territorial priority. Let the trials demonstrate capability, endurance, and worthiness. In the premium viewing section, Earth's official consortium delegation maintained carefully neutral expressions. Ambassador Chen Kurosawa sat rigid, flanked by advisors whose body language screamed diplomatic anxiety. They'd fought for humanity's inclusion in the Gauntlet. Now they had to watch their species potentially humiliate itself on a galactic stage. The arena floor's central platform expanded, creating a disk 30 meters in diameter. Arbitrator Volanath materialized at its center, his form magnified holographically until he dominated the space. Images materialized above the arena, competing species in their preparation chambers. The Vok, massive beings of dense muscle and armored hide, the Setheri serpentine creatures, whose neural processing operated at speeds that made quantum computers look primitive. The Kajal, insectoid colonists, whose hive mind coordination had conquered 3-star clusters, and humans, small, fragile, evolutionarily recent. The comparison was devastating. Individual assessment, Valath continued, will proceed in rotation. First competitor, Kasal Swarm Unit Designation 7. The viewing galleries erupted in chittering communication as a Kajal emerged onto the arena floor. The creature stood 2 meters tall on 6 legs, its carapace gleaming like polished obsidian. Sensory antennae twitched, processing environmental data across spectrums human technology could barely measure. The arena shifted. Gravity intensified. The change visible in how atmospheric particles suddenly hung heavier. The Kazal adjusted instantly, its legs compensating for the increased load. Obstacles materialized. Walls of shifting energy, gaps that opened and closed with killing precision. Platforms that rotated at speeds designed to fling competitors into oblivion. The Kajil moved like liquid death, flowing through the course with mechanical precision. Where gaps appeared, it anticipated. Where energy barriers formed, it found passages invisible to human perception. Its time across the extended endurance trial generated numbers that made Yora's stomach drop. 3 more species competed in rotation, each demonstrating capabilities that redefined human understanding of possible. The Setheri's cognitive processing trial involved solving mathematical proofs that would have taken Earth's best computers weeks, completed in minutes. The Vok's thermal resistance trial showed them functioning normally in environments that transitioned from stellar surface heat to cryogenic cold. Kajal aggregate score 4,200 points, Volnath announced. Above species median. Acceptable performance. Then Volanath's attention shifted to the human chamber. Next competitor, human designation Zhen Liu. Cognitive processing assessment. Jin emerged from the preparation chamber, her slight form almost comical next to the armored bulk of the previous competitors. The viewing galleries erupted in what the translation matrix interpreted as amusement. Whistles, clicks, subsonic rumbles that conveyed skepticism bordering on mockery. The physicist walked to the center platform, her expression serene. Yara recognized that look. Jin entering the mental space where she'd solved equations that had stumped entire research teams. Holographic challenges materialized. 3-dimensional puzzles that rotated through non-Euclidean space. Mathematical sequences that followed alien logic systems. Pattern recognition tests that operated in spectrums beyond human visual range. The arena dimmed. Neural disruption fields activated. their effects visible as reality seemed to shimmer around Zhen's head. The fields were designed to interrupt normal cognitive function, creating artificial confusion and sensory distortion. Most species required extensive augmentation to function under such conditions. Jack's monitoring system screamed warnings immediately. Neural activity spiking. She's compensating for the disruption fields by overclocking her own cognitive processes. That's not sustainable. Zhen closed her eyes. How long can she maintain it? Yara demanded. Minutes at most before neural fatigue becomes permanent damage. But Zhen wasn't functioning on normal parameters. Years of working with quantum mechanics had trained her mind to hold contradictory concepts simultaneously, to process information in ways that violated classical logic. The disruption fields created chaos. She simply accepted chaos as another variable. Her hands moved in precise gestures, manipulating holographic interfaces with the certainty of someone working through familiar territory. Puzzles collapsed and reformed. Sequences resolved themselves. Patterns emerged from noise. She was answering questions that tested the fundamental nature of intelligence itself, proving that human cognition could adapt to frameworks never designed for it. Human Zhen Liu aggregate score 3,800 points. Volaneth's tone carried the barest hint of surprise. Within acceptable parameters. The viewing gallery's mockery shifted to something else. Confusion, perhaps. Or the beginning of reassessment. Zhen's time expired. She opened her eyes, swayed slightly, then steadied herself. Blood trickled from her nose. A minor cranial hemorrhage from the neural strain. The physicist walked back to the preparation chamber on legs that threatened to fail. Amara caught her as she crossed the threshold, immediately administering neural stabilizers while Jack scanned for permanent damage. That, Zhen whispered, was unpleasant. You're hemorrhaging from the nose and showing signs of minor neural trauma, Amara hissed. That's beyond unpleasant, but within acceptable parameters. A weak smile. Did you hear? Acceptable. 3 more trials followed. Amara's thermal resistance assessment pushed her through temperature ranges that would have killed an unprotected human in seconds. She emerged with second-degree burns and minor frostbite, but a score of 3,600 points acceptable. Riko's combat reflexes trial left her exhausted and bruised, facing holographic opponents that adapted to her fighting style with inhuman precision. Her score 4,000 points above acceptable. Then came Kade's turn. Human designation Kade Voss. Extended endurance assessment. Triple gravity environment sustained duration. The arena floor reconfigured. What had been a complex obstacle course simplified into something more brutal, a flat platform surrounded by monitoring equipment. Gravity wells activated, their effect immediate and crushing. Kade stood at the platform's center, his knees buckling slightly as his body suddenly weighed 3 times normal. Muscles that had been conditioned through decades of training screamed in protest. His cardiovascular system, already stressed, began working overtime to pump blood against the increased load. Jack's displays went critical within seconds. Heart rate 210, blood oxygen dropping. This is insane. He can't sustain this. He will, Yara said quietly. Because that's what he does. The trial was simple. Survive under triple gravity for as long as possible while performing basic physical tasks. Walk, climb, manipulate objects, solve simple puzzles. Activities that would be trivial under normal conditions became Herculean efforts when every movement required fighting against crushing weight. Kade moved like a man underwater, each step deliberate and agonizing. His face flushed red as blood vessels strained, capillaries threatening to rupture. Sweat poured from him. His body's cooling system pushed beyond design specifications. But he moved. Step by excruciating step, Kade crossed the platform. Retreated an object. Returned it to a designated location. Climbed a wall that would have been child's play under normal gravity but became a test of absolute will under triple loading. His hands shook, muscles suffering micro-trauma with each pull upward. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The viewing galleries had gone silent, watching something they didn't quite understand. Most species would have collapsed by now, their physiologies simply unable to function under such sustained stress. Humans weren't built like other species. Persistence hunting on ancient savannas had created cardiovascular systems designed for marathon endurance. Bipedal locomotion meant center of gravity and balance that compensated efficiently for increased load, and something else. Something the Consortium hadn't accounted for. Humans were very, very good at ignoring their bodies' screaming demands to stop. 30 minutes. Kade's movements had slowed to crawling, but he continued. Puzzle solved with shaking hands. Object retrieved and placed with absolute precision despite muscles that quivered on the edge of failure. Neural feedback is off the charts, Jack reported, awed despite himself. He's generating endogenous opioids at levels I've never seen, essentially drugging himself to keep functioning. 45 minutes. Kade's vision began to tunnel, the world narrowing to the next objective, the next movement. His hands and feet felt distant. Someone else's appendages he controlled through remote suggestion. But still he moved. At 60 minutes, Arbitrator Voloneth made a gesture, and the gravity wells deactivated. Kade collapsed immediately, his body finally permitted to acknowledge what it had endured. Medical drones swarmed him, scanning for catastrophic damage while Jack screamed readings into his communicator. Severe muscle trauma across major groups, cardiovascular strain approaching failure, neural exhaustion, multiple stress fractures in lower extremities. The medical officer's voice cracked. He should be dead, but Kade was breathing, conscious, his storm-gray eyes still burning with defiant focus. Human Kade Voss aggregate score 5,200 points. Valist's translated voice carried something new, not quite respect but perhaps the recognition that assumptions might require revision. Significantly above species median. Performance, notable. The viewing galleries erupted in communication, species conferring in frequencies across the electromagnetic spectrum. The humans had scored better than anticipated. Not dominant, but not the embarrassment the Consortium had expected. In the preparation chamber, Yara allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. 12,600 points aggregate, so far. Respectable. If they could survive the Cooperative challenge with even minimal scoring, the arena shifted again. Platforms reconfiguring into something vast and ominous. Volneth's holographic form expanded, commanding attention. Individual assessment concludes. Competing species will now enter Cooperative challenge, simultaneous competition designed to test coordinated capability under adverse conditions. All team members must participate. Medical intervention permitted only in cases of critical failure as defined by Consortium parameters. The viewing galleries pressed closer to their observation barriers, anticipation palpable. Cooperative challenge parameters loading now. Holographic schematics materialized throughout the arena, showing a labyrinth that defied rational architecture. Shifting walls, variable gravity zones, environmental hazards that cycled through conditions lethal to most biology, and at the labyrinth's heart, a goal marker pulsing with ominous light. Teams must reach central objective and retrieve designation markers to confirm completion. All members must survive to conclusion. Time limit 2 standard hours. Failure results in species reassessment and potential relegation. Yara felt ice crystallize in her chest. They designed this to kill us, not kill, Jack corrected grimly. Force medical intervention. Force us to quit. Prove we're not capable. Kade pulled himself upright with Amara's assistance, his body wrapped in medical support braces that Jack had applied at battlefield speed. And we don't quit? You can barely stand, Amara objected. You've got compression fractures in both legs, muscle tissue that's partially liquefied, and a heart rhythm that suggests impending cardiac event. You're done. I'm doing the challenge. Kade, all members must participate. His voice carried absolute finality. If I sit out, we forfeit. Earth gets classified as incapable and we spend the next century begging for table scraps from species that think we're adorable pets. He met her eyes. I'd rather die in that arena. Riko checked her own injuries. Extensive bruising, minor fractures in her left hand, exhaustion that made her limbs feel carved from lead. We all would. Jen, still recovering from neural strain that should have hospitalized her, simply nodded. Let's show them what humans do when we're cornered. The chamber's door irised open. Beyond, the arena beckoned with its promise of calculated destruction. Yara activated her command channel to the Earth delegation. Ambassador Kurosawa, you're seeing this. The Cooperative challenge parameters are designed to break us. The ambassador's reply came instantly, her voice tight with controlled fury. We're filing protests through 7 different diplomatic channels. The Consortium is claiming the parameters are consistent with previous Gauntlet iterations, but the data doesn't support that. They've escalated difficulty specifically for this round. Can you delay the challenge? Not without triggering a diplomatic crisis that could result in immediate Earth isolation. The Consortium would interpret delay as admission of inability. A pause, heavy with implications. You have full authorization to withdraw if the situation becomes untenable. We won't sacrifice human lives for political positioning. Noted, Yara acknowledged, knowing Kade would never accept that option. The team assembled at the arena entrance, a motley collection of injured, exhausted specialists facing a challenge that fresh competitors in peak condition would have found daunting. Around them other species teams gathered, the Vulk in their armored majesty, the Sethiri with their unsettling serpentine grace, teams of crystalline entities whose thought processes operated at speeds that made human cognition seem glacial, all of them watching the humans with expressions that translated clearly across species boundaries. You're going to die in there. The arena entrance yawned open, revealing the labyrinth's beginning, a corridor of shifting walls that writhed like living tissue. Gravity fluctuated visibly, the distortions creating zones where atmosphere hung thick or thin to near vacuum. Teams enter on my mark, Volanath announced. Challenge initiates in 30 seconds. Kade gathered his team close, speaking quickly. Standard formation, Riko on point for threat assessment. Zhen and Amara center for support. I take rear guard. We move together, we communicate constantly, and we adapt to whatever hell they throw at us. And if someone goes down, Amara asked, we carry them. Nobody gets left behind. 20 seconds. Around them, other teams adopted their own configurations. The Vulk formed a wedge, their massive bodies designed to bulldoze through obstacles. The Sethishuri aligned in a configuration that suggested hive-mind coordination. The crystalline entities simply shimmered, their relationship to physical space ambiguous at best. 10 seconds. Jack's voice crackled through their neural links. All monitoring systems active. I'll be tracking every biometric and will call medical intervention if anyone enters critical parameters. Don't be heroes. Come back alive. 5 seconds. Riko rolled her shoulders despite the pain, settling into the combat readiness that had made her one of Earth's premier fighters. Zhen closed her eyes briefly, centering herself despite the neural trauma. Amara checked medical supplies one final time, her surgeon's hands steady once more. Kade simply stared into the labyrinth, his expression unreadable. Initiate. The teams surged forward into chaos. The labyrinth consumed them immediately, walls contracting around the human team like a predatory throat. Riko led with movements economical despite exhaustion, her enhanced reflexes parsing threats from her environment with split-second precision. Behind her, Zhen and Amara maintained formation, their footsteps synchronized through training that had become instinctual. Kade brought up the rear, each step a negotiation between willpower and biomechanics that threatened catastrophic failure. Gravity shift ahead, Riko called, her voice tight. Looks like fluctuation between 0.8 and 3 standard. Unpredictable intervals. The corridor opened into a chamber where physics behaved like liquid, gravity wells forming and dissolving with stomach-churning randomness. In the center, a bridge of hexagonal platforms extended across a gap that dropped into darkness. Monitoring equipment lined the walls, recording every competitor's response to the manufactured hell. The Vaka team had already entered, their massive forms struggling as gravity suddenly tripled mid-crossing. One stumbled, nearly pitching into the abyss before its companions caught it. Their roars of challenge echoed through the chamber, sounds that translated as both fury and determination. We time the fluctuations, Subman said, her neural-damaged brain still parsing patterns from chaos. There's rhythm to it. 3.2 seconds high gravity, 4.1 seconds low gravity, 1.8 seconds standard. If we move during the low cycle, we might make it, Amara finished, and if we miscalculate, then Jack gets to practice emergency retrieval procedures. Kade's voice carried grim humor. Riko, you're fastest even injured. Test the timing. The young fighter didn't hesitate. launching herself onto the first platform during what Zhen calculated as a low-gravity phase. For a heartbeat, she seemed to float, the reduced load making her movements almost balletic. Then gravity surged, slamming her down with triple force. She absorbed the impact through legs that screamed protest, rolled forward to the next platform, caught the timing. Pattern confirmed, she transmitted back. But it's tight, margins measured in fractions of seconds. The team moved as one, trusting Zhen's calculations and Riko's confirmations. Step, pause, surge forward during low-gravity windows. The platforms beneath them were slick with something that might have been condensation or might have been deliberately applied to increase difficulty. Halfway across, Amara's foot slipped. She tipped backward, arms windmilling, the abyss reaching up with hungry darkness. Kade's hand shot out, his damaged body moving on pure combat reflex. He caught her wrist, the sudden weight nearly dislocating his shoulder. His compression-fractured legs buckled, sending lightning bolts of agony through his nervous system. "Got you," he grunted through gritted teeth, hauling her back to stability even as his body threatened mutiny. They completed the crossing seconds before gravity locked into sustained triple load, the platforms beneath them groaning under the increased stress. Behind them, a crystalline entity team shattered mid-transit, their exotic biology unable to maintain cohesion through the fluctuation. Medical drones swarmed immediately, retrieving fragments for reconstitution. First casualties. The Consortium's message was clear: this challenge broke species. The labyrinth continued, each chamber presenting new horrors. Temperature extremes that flash-froze atmosphere then superheated it to plasma. Cognitive disruption fields that made reality itself seem negotiable. Obstacles that required strength humans simply didn't possess, forcing creative problem-solving under time pressure that ground away at mental reserves. An hour into the challenge, they reached a chamber that stopped them cold. The space was vast, easily 100 meters across, its ceiling lost in artificial haze. At the center, suspended by gravitic manipulation, hung the designation marker they needed to retrieve, a crystalline sphere pulsing with alien energies. Between the team and their objective stretched a killing field of energy barriers, each one cycling through frequencies that would disrupt different biological processes. Neural disruption barriers, Zhen identified, her voice slurred from cognitive strain, but also electromagnetic interference. Gravitational shear and something I don't recognize. Probably targets silicon-based biology. Around the chamber's perimeter, other teams clustered, assessing the same impossible obstacle. The Volk tested an approach, one of their members advancing into the energy field. It managed 3 meters before its nervous system overloaded, dropping the creature into convulsions. Medical drones intervened, pulling it back. The Setheri attempted a different strategy, their serpentine forms attempting to navigate between the barrier's pulses. But the timing was randomized, patterns shifting to prevent prediction. They retreated after losing one team member to catastrophic neural feedback. "This isn't solvable," Amara stated flatly. "Not without abilities we don't have. The barriers are specifically calibrated to disrupt the biological processes that species in this challenge possess. It's elimination by design." Kade studied the obstacle with tactical eyes that had parsed impossible situations into actionable plans across 2 decades of military operations. "There's always a solution, just might not be the one they expect." "Enlighten us," Riko said, her own analytical mind finding no path forward. "The barriers are calibrated for specific biology." Kade gestured at the monitoring equipment lining the chamber, designed to detect and disrupt organic processes. Neural activity, electromagnetic signatures, gravitational interaction with mass. "Right," Zhen confirmed. "Which means biological organisms can't cross without catastrophic disruption. But what about non-biological objects?" Kade's expression carried the ghost of what might have been a smile. "What if we don't cross at all?" Understanding dawned across 3 faces simultaneously. It was insane. It violated every parameter of the challenge. It was exactly the kind of lateral thinking that separated humans from species with stronger, faster, more capable physiology. "We throw the marker," Amara whispered. "More accurately, we retrieve it using non-biological means." Kade began stripping non-essential equipment from his gear, assessing weight and aerodynamics. The barriers detect and disrupt biology. They're not programmed to stop simple physics. Riko was already adapting the plan. We need trajectory calculation, timing to account for gravitational fluctuation, and enough force to reach the marker then return it. I can calculate trajectory. Zhen offered, her damaged neural architecture still capable of complex mathematics. But the throw itself, the self-engage, your arms are destroyed. Muscle trauma across your upper body means you can't generate the required force. I can. Riko flexed her hands, assessing her own damage. Left hand's compromised, but my right arm's functional. If I use my whole body, rotate from the core, I can generate sufficient velocity. It was desperate, cobbled together from desperation and the uniquely human tendency to look at impossible situations and ask, but what if we just ignore the rules? They worked with frantic precision. Zhen calculated trajectories, factoring in gravitational fluctuations, air resistance, and the marker's probable mass based on its visual appearance. Amara fabricated a retrieval system from medical supplies, adhesive compounds designed for tissue repair repurposed as grappling mechanisms. Kade coordinated, his tactical mind orchestrating chaos into operational planning. Around them, other teams watched with expressions ranging from confusion to what might have been respect. The humans weren't trying to power through the obstacles. They were refusing to engage with them on the challenge's terms. One chance, Riko said, hefting the improvised grappling device. It looked absurd. Medical tape and adhesive wrapped around a weighted equipment cylinder, trailing a line made from braided emergency supplies. If I miss, we're out of materials to try again. Then don't miss, Kade said simply. Riko settled into position, her body finding the centered balance that preceded perfect execution. Years of training compressed into muscle memory, every neural pathway optimized for this exact moment of controlled violence. The chamber fell silent. Other teams recognizing significance even if they didn't understand the specifics. She threw, the grappling device, arced through the space between the energy barriers, tumbling end over end in a trajectory that Zhen's calculations had painted as theoretically possible. It passed through zones where biological tissue would have liquefied, unaffected by disruptions calibrated for organic processes. The device struck the suspended marker with a crystalline chime that echoed through the chamber. Adhesive engaged, bonding to the sphere's surface. Riko pulled, her injured body protesting, but the marker held firm, too securely suspended by gravitic manipulation. The suspension field, Amara realized. We need to disrupt it. Already on it. The Zhen was manipulating their equipment, stripping components from monitoring devices with hands that shook from neural fatigue. If I can generate an electromagnetic pulse calibrated to interfere with the gravitic field's frequency, you'll collapse the suspension, Kade finished. Bringing the marker down where we can catch it, or destroying it completely, disqualifying us. Jean's smile was slightly unhinged. 50-50 odds. I'll take those chances any day. Kade braced himself, position.